Thank you. Yeah. Doesn't matter. So episode 1. 9 more to come. And then a whole other season after that. So we have been, anyone who hasn't heard the news, we have been renewed for a 3rd season. So this one and 19 more. Hope you liked it.
I'm sure that will be a 4th and a 5th.
Well, I take nothing for granted, but I certainly hope so.
You, sir, have a larger experience than me, of course. So, but oh man, for this kind of reaction, it's a sure thing.
Well,
you deserve it. E basicamente a ideia agora é vocês porem perguntas ao Sr. George Martin. Por favor, atenção às perguntas que fazem. Nada daquilo que viram aqui para o futuro, portanto, no entretanto. E tenham atenção a isso, portanto, para não estragar as surpresas que virão aí. Algumas pessoas já viram alguns episódios, portanto, atenção a isso. E para já, se não se importam, eu vou começar por fazer umas questões que vieram através do Skype e do Facebook, que está neste momento também ativo. O vosso Q&A, a vossa participação estará a fazer streaming na internet. George, to start off, I have a couple of questions here that arrive us through the Skype and Facebook.
Okay.
The first one is from Rita Viegas. I don't know where she is from, but anyway. You are... Rita Viegas is here, see? Hello! Então! Olha que fixe! Eu dizer, não sei de onde é que ela é, enfim. What was the character that was the most difficult so far to kill off for you? And what was the moment that you have the most fun to write?
The hardest character to kill off, well, you know, they're not really hard to kill off. I swat them, they die like flies. You know, most of the major deaths have been planned since I began this series back in the early 90s. But sometimes things are hard to write. Now, of course, if you're just talking about the show, you've only seen a few major deaths so far. Of course, those of you who read the books know that some other deaths are coming. The big sequence in the 3rd book, the wedding, was the hardest thing that I ever wrote. That was very difficult to do. It was the last thing I wrote in that particular book, even though it occurs 2/3 of the way through the book. I had to skip over that chapter and finish the whole rest of the book. And then finally, when it was all done, I came back and made myself write that chapter because it was emotionally wrenching to write, even as I know it was for many of you to read. But that's the way I think death should be in fiction. I mean, too often in television, we use death as an act break, and we don't deal with the consequences of death. If you, as most of us have experienced death in your family, the death of a parent, or the death of a close friend or a sibling, or even, God help us, a child, you know how hard that is. And yet we see people die all the time in entertainment, and we sort of gloss right over it and get on with the action. And I've never felt that's right. I mean, if you're going to kill characters, you know, you owe it to them to make it hurt. It should hurt. Death should hurt. It's our great tragedy as human beings. Our mortality is central to our whole experience here on Earth. So it's not something I take lightly, and I try to make the deaths of leading characters as powerful as they can be. And the other half of it was what was most fun to write?
Yeah, the moment that you have, that was the most fun to write.
Oh boy, the most fun to write. Well, I have a lot of fun writing Tyrion's dialogue. It doesn't always come to me right away. You know, Tyrion throws off these witticisms, and I wish I could throw off witticisms like Tyrion, but often it takes me, weeks to come up with the things that he throws off in a second's notice. In real life, I'm very witty, but I'm witty late, like 2 weeks after the occasion, I said, "That's what I should have said," and I remember it. But I can do that with Tyrion, and I like it when a little piece like that comes together. That's fun.
Cool. Vocês não precisam que eu traduza, pois não, vocês sabem. Obrigado. Alguma pergunta daí para já, para começar? George, will you do the honors? Who wants?
Okay, there. Yeah.
Blue shirt?
Blue shirt man.
Hi, good evening.
Good.
First of all, thank you so much for coming and being here with us.
That's my pleasure.
Very cool. My question is, we've just heard that the third season is going to start shooting, and we are very, very glad that's happening and that many more seasons will come. We also heard before that it's your second trip to Portugal. Is there any foreseeable chance that a part of one of the future seasons would be filmed here?
Well, I won't say that there's no chance. There's always a chance. We shoot in many different locations. We have great location scouts, and I know they're always looking for places that will give us what we need. We've shot, our principal filming location is in Belfast in Northern Ireland. That's not likely to change. We have the largest soundstage in Europe there in the Paint Hall, which is on the former Harland and Wolff shipyards where they once built and painted ships like the Titanic. So it's a gigantic space, and we get it under very favorable terms, and the Northern Irish government is very, very supportive of the filming there. But as beautiful as it is, Northern Ireland does not give us all of the things we need. So during the original pilot, we shot some scenes in Scotland, and we also shot a large sequence in Morocco. When we went to the first season, we went to the island of Malta and filmed a number of the things there, particularly the King's Landing stuff. For the second season, instead of going back to Malta, we went to Dubrovnik in Croatia, which is just gorgeous and appears as King's Landing in the episode you just saw. And of course, for Beyond the Wall stuff, we shot in Iceland. And I didn't get to visit those two locations, but boy, I would have loved to have visited Iceland. By all reports, it was absolutely gorgeous. I don't think Portugal is likely to take the place of Iceland anytime soon, not unless suddenly the glaciers move way far south. But you certainly have some beautiful landscapes and some magnificent castles. And I know they're always looking for new locations. I mean, there's been talk about returning to Morocco for some stuff. I don't know if it'll happen. I know we've looked at Spain for various locations. A lot of no, not Spain. People are shaking their heads here. Okay. So I don't know. Presumably they've looked at Portugal too. Frankly, for some of it, and most of you will know this if you follow film production. A lot of it goes behind-the-scenes negotiations between the government of this place and the production company. Television and film productions tend to go to countries where they get very favorable tax treatment. Sometimes the country even puts some money into the budget, and it's worthwhile. I mean, it's usually controversial because there are some citizens who say, "Why are you giving our tax money to these Hollywood guys?" But for every dollar that they put into the budget of a show, there's all these jobs created, whenever a movie or a television show is shooting in your show. We've added, I think by conservative estimates, something like $40 million to the Northern Irish economy over the last 2 years, the first 2 seasons shooting in Belfast. So there is considerable benefit, but I'm not part of that part of the process. The other producers and so forth handle all of that, but who knows? You have a beautiful country, and I could easily see some of it being used, but it's all a matter of economics and where we can find great locations, where we can find highly skilled crews, and to handle the technical aspects of the production. and, you know, the terms. Next question. Yes, there.
Hi, my name's Sarah Chamberlain. I'm just interested to know, beyond the actual book itself, how much influence do you have on how your book is shot?
How much influence do I have on how the book is shot?
I also have a very
Well,
quick
I'm,
second.
I'm a co-executive producer on the show. I write one script per season, and I have a fair amount of influence on casting. I review all the casting choices and comment on them. And I consult regularly with David Benioff and Dan Weiss, the showrunners. That being said, theirs is the final decision. They are the showrunners. You know, the book is my baby, the show is their baby. And some of the time I wish I could be more involved in the show, but it's a full-time job being a producer on a television show. You have to be there every day. You have to be on the set. You have to supervise the script as it's written and rewritten and rewritten and rewritten and then rewritten and then polished and then rewritten. The post-production, the editing, the sound dubbing, the color timing, all of this is stuff that falls on the producers of the show, particularly on the showrunners who have the final responsibility. It's a great and exciting and exhilarating job. You know, there were 10 years when I was in Hollywood, and you know, my aspiration was to be a showrunner myself. But ultimately, I left that behind, and I returned to books. And I still, as some of you may realize, I have 2 books to write, and they're going to be 1,500 pages each. That's 3,000 pages. That's going to keep me busy for the next 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, for quite a while. And if I take on the job of being a full-time producer on the Game of Thrones TV show, then it's not going to be 4 or 5 years. It's going to be 15 years. So I better not do that. I think I better stick to the books. David and Dan have done a great job, and I'm content to let them continue doing a great job.
Sorry, just very last question. I was asked to ask when the next book's due to be out.
When it's done. Let's see, who's next? Who has a question here? Right there, second row. You, yes, you.
Esse senhor aqui à frente,
Yeah.
a segunda fila, microfone para ele. Aqui, eu vou lá.
Obrigado. Thank you, Josh. I was just wondering, Peter Dinklage just blew my mind as Tyrion in the first season, and obviously in the first episode of this season. Has any more actors actually surprised you as the characters you created? Because it's always so interesting.
Yes, well, Peter, of course, is amazing. As he's won the Emmy and the Golden Globe, and the prestigious Scream Award, never forget, for his portrayal of Tyrion Lannister. And he deserves all of those awards and many more. I hope there are many more Emmys in his future. He's just sensational. And he was not our first choice for Tyrion. He was our only choice for Tyrion. We did not audition anyone else. We did not meet with anyone else. We did not really even consider anyone else for Tyrion. We just went out and made an offer to Peter and thankfully signed him. If he had turned us down, I don't know what we would have done. It would have been very, very challenging, because I don't know there's anybody else in the world capable of playing that role as he's playing it. We have an extraordinary cast. They've all done very well. Is there anyone who has surprised me, though? I don't know. In a sense, I suppose all 3 of the principal children were surprises. They were the hardest roles to cast. It's really hard to find good kid actors. There are a lot of kid actors in the world, and including in London and Ireland, where we principally conducted our search for our Arya, our Sansa, and our Bran. But most kids, you know, it's hard for a kid to memorize all these long speeches, you know, so you get kids in and they've memorized the lines, but that's all they've done. You know, there's nothing, they're not acting, they're just reciting lines that they've memorized, and I'm not trying to criticize for that. It's a great achievement for 9-year-old kid to do something like that, but that doesn't mean they can carry off the role. And then on the other hand, you get the other extreme. You get sort of the kid actor who has been taught, maybe he's taken a few drama classes in school, and he's been taught that acting is all about emoting. So they emote all over the place. They're grimacing and grinning and making faces, and it's, you know, you just want to tell them to stop it, you know. Stop mugging for the camera. It's way, way too much. And you know, you look at hundreds of these auditions and you begin to despair of ever finding it. And then we find someone like Maisie. The minute I saw Maisie Williams' audition, I knew she was Arya. And David and Dan all agreed. I mean, she was just perfect. And Sophie Turner, Isaac Hempstead, right there, they're doing amazing too. And you know, most kid actors in Hollywood, there's a lot of them on sitcoms that come out of Los Angeles. But all they have to really do is be cute and kind of get off a snappy one-liner occasionally that puts down the adults. That's the usual sitcom formula. Our kids have to do a lot more than that. Our kids have to convey a full range of human emotions, including some fairly dark emotions like grief and pain and loss and fear. That takes serious acting chops, and we are very fortunate to find serious acting chops in those three kids. Sean Bean was great, but he was no surprise. Lena Headey was great, but she was no surprise. You know, I could say that about all of things. Emilia Clarke has been amazing as Daenerys. I thought her scenes in this one were marvelous. And the fact that she has to deliver half of her lines in a made-up artificial language that no actual human being had ever spoken, that's pretty impressive too. I know that, let's see, all your things are subtitled here, so it was actually odd to me because when she's speaking Dothraki, I'm used to the English subtitles at the bottom, and I couldn't read the Portuguese subtitles, so that was the only part of the thing I didn't understand. But Amelia is great. Another actor, one of our supporting actors who doesn't get enough credit, who really deserves it, is Conleth Hill, who plays Varys. God, he is wonderful at Varys, and he really has completely disappeared into that thing. I mean, I saw his audition when he was still being Conleth Hill, and you know, he's nothing like Varys. You know, you can see the Woody Allen movie that came out a few years ago, starring Larry David. If you see that, he has a small part in that, where he's one of Larry David's friends. And take a look at him, and you're seeing someone much more closer to real Conleth Hill, and then you see him as Varys, and he's just become the character, and there's no traces of the actor who was around there remaining, so he's pretty amazing. But I could go on all day. I love our actors, I love our cast. So I should ask for another question here.
Can I'm just a quick one here.
What? Yeah, okay.
Good night. Do you think that the TV show will influence your writing from now on?
Will the TV show influence my writing? No, it will not. The TV show is great. I love it. I think you can tell how enthusiastic I am, but I'm not going to change my story. You know, I've been writing this story since 1991. It's pretty well dominated my life since 1996 or thereabouts. I have a very firm idea of where I'm going and who these characters are. And the TV show inevitably is going to diverge at certain points and take certain different paths. So the question is, should I adjust what I was planning in order to fit better with the TV show? No, I'm not. I think that would be a mistake. I have to finish telling the story I set out to tell with the visions of the characters that I envisioned from the beginning and the eventual fate for those characters. I can't diverge. You know, essentially these are two different versions of the same story is the way you have to look at it, just as there may be, you know, a movie of Moby Dick, and there's still the novel of Moby Dick, and then there's the comic book of Moby Dick, and they're all the story of the Great White Whale and Captain Ahab, but they emphasize certain things, and they're treated differently, and, you know, in some senses the novel is always canon when the novel comes first, and that's kind of what I feel here. I love the show, but the books are my baby, and I'm going to finish them the way I intended to finish them. You saw a little diversion here. You know, I mean, there were a few original scenes here. Those of you who know the books will know that some of these scenes are not in the books. They were added by David and Dan. And, there's certain also factual things that were changed. It's funny, people are always saying how bloody I am and I'm not afraid to kill people. And I suppose that's true. I suppose I'm guilty of that, or that can be laid at me. But David and Dan are actually bloodier than I am. I mean, in the books, only one bastard is killed. Here, they killed, 4, and there's the implication that so they're already 3 or 4 ahead of me on the body count there, and it just gets worse in succeeding episodes. So when people say in Game of Thrones no one is safe, in referring to the books, well, it's even more true in the TV series, because David and Dan are killing people who are safe in the books, at least for a few more books, but they're not safe in the TV shows, so you better keep watching, and you better hope your favorite actor doesn't ask for a raise. Yes, who else? Do we have someone from this side? Okay, ask a question. Here in the front row.
Is there a particular reason why Silver dies in this episode? That's it. That was my favorite character.
The horse was your favorite character? I really don't know what to say if the horse was your favorite character. I'm glad you liked the horse, but I thought I created a few characters who were even more engaging than the horse. That surprised me too when I saw it. Because Silver is the Silver is definitely not dead in the books. In fact, I was just writing a scene, the Battle of Marine, which opens the Winds of Winter, where Sir Barristan, Dany is gone from the city, so Sir Barristan rides the Silver into battle to kind of conjure her up. So the horse is still around in book 6 in the thing, and is only dead in the TV show. I guess they just wanted to show the crossing the Red Waste and how dangerous it is. On the other hand, although they killed the horse, they kept the handmaid alive. You may recall that in the book, one of Dany's handmaids dies of thirst and sickness and dehydration while crossing the Red Waste. And that handmaid, who was seen in the background, is still alive, but you'd rather have the horse, okay. You're one of those people, huh? You gotta be very careful about killing animals. When we killed Lady in the first season, we got hundreds of letters of protest and angry things about people. I'll never watch your show again. Nobody cared that we also killed Micah the butcher's boy. The dog got a lot more impassioned defenses than the poor kid. So I don't know what that tells us about people. I can tell you a funny story about the horse, though, if you want a funny story about the horse. It's actually related to the original pilot, which we filmed in Morocco. As some of you know, we did a certain amount of recasting after the first pilot. So we filmed Dany's wedding scene in Morocco, and of course there's the big sequence there where Dany is given the silver filly by Khal Drogo. And in the book, she mounts up the filly and she rides away, and is she riding away because she's afraid? Is she trying to flee? But she turns the silver around, she rides it out, and she rides it back very fast through the center of the camp, and there's a huge fire in the center of the camp, and she leaps over the fire on the horse. And we had that stunt all set up to go. I was in Morocco as doing a cameo as one of the wedding guests, and was watching them trying to film that. And we had this beautiful silver filly and a gorgeous looking horse, just magnificent to look at. And we had one of Europe's top stunt riders, and we had this great fire built, and we were going to do the whole thing. That horse just would not jump over the fire. There's nothing we could do. They spent half the day trying to get the damn horse to jump over the damn fire, and it didn't work. So finally, David and Dan said, "Well, okay, put out the fire, and just have the horse jump over the logs, and then we will put in the fire with CGI." That horse still wouldn't jump over the fire. The horse says, I don't care, you're not fooling me. That was on fire a little while ago, and I'm too smart to jump over that. So he had to scrap the whole thing, which kind of was disappointing because it's a fairly big moment in the book. But that's the realities of television production. You can't, you know, if you were Peter Jackson and you're filming Lord of the Rings, you could take 3 weeks to get the horse jumping over the fire. But on a television budget, you better get it because otherwise you're going to fall behind and you're going to have to cut other stuff. So you got to do it. But then we did the wedding consummation where Danny and Drogo ride out to consummate their marriage. Now. That was different in the original pilot than it was in the version that was ultimately broadcast. The original pilot was much closer to what I wrote in the books. It took place at night, it took place by a stream, and the two of them ride out on their horses, and they tie their horses to a nearby tree, and it's more of a seduction than the rougher consummation, semi-rape consummation that you see in the pilot is filmed. So. But it's still a sex scene, and it was cold in Morocco too. I mean, it was hot during the day. It was like 100 degrees during the day, but you're in the middle of the desert, and then at night the sun goes down and it gets very cold. So we're all standing around wrapped up in blankets, and poor Jason Momoa and Tamsin Merchant, who was playing Danny, are naked, doing their sex scene, and it was, you know, pretty hot sex scene that we're watching, and we're watching it on the video cameras here at night, and they're off by the stream doing it, and suddenly I hear someone laughing, and then someone else starts to laugh, and I'm hearing this ripple of laughing. I say, what the hell is going on? It's ruining the, you know, they're doing this passionate lovemaking scene. It looks pretty good to me. Why are people laughing at it? There's nothing fun. And then I said, oh, and what we realized then was that Silver Filly was not in fact a filly. The Silver Filly was a stallion, and evidently was quite turned on by the hotness of the sex scene, because in the background we're seeing this enormous horse erection that is appearing right behind the actors. So we had a cut. And when we redid it, you'll notice there are no horses in the background of the scene as ultimately filmed. So that maybe that's why they killed the silver horses. All the trouble that horse caused, wouldn't jump the fire, and you know, getting turned on during the sex scenes is terrible.
George, another question from the web. This one from Vasco Napoleon. Is he here? No. Just before you start writing, did you create a mythology of the world and also a backstory for each one of the characters, or?
No, that's backwards. I don't. Yeah, there's some writers who work that way, who work out the entire history of the world and mythology and you know, geography and everything. But not me. I start with a situation. I start with characters. I start with action. In my case, I started with the scene where they find the direwolf pups in the summer snows, which the first chapter of Game of Thrones. And I didn't know who these people were or what kind of world they lived in or really very much at all about the situation, but that first scene had come to me vividly. So I wrote that first scene, and it only took me like 3 days. It was almost like it wrote itself. And then I knew what the second scene would be, and the mythology and the world building and all of that stuff grew alongside of the story. The story drives the engine, and then the background stuff you build along with it. I still think that's the best way to write a story, but it's certainly the best way for me to write a story is to begin with the characters, to begin with the story, not with the background material.
Do you dream a lot of the things that you write about, the characters?
I daydream.
Sleeping-wise.
I daydream about that.
Only daydream?
Yeah, I don't. At night, my dreams are incoherent and useless, I'm afraid. So I know some writers claim they have good ideas in dreams,
Yeah.
but you know, I don't. You know.
Not your case.
No.
We're glad for that because, as we can see. Mais alguma pergunta da plateia? What?
All right, over there on the edge there.
Well, good evening. I'd like to ask, what was you based on to create such strong characters, such as, for example, Cersei or Caitlyn, in a world where women wouldn't almost have any power or any sort of ways to show themselves? Basically, what was you based on to create such characters in the books?
I think that he asked about the women and the way that they were portrayed in those worlds, that they didn't have any power. So where did you get the inspiration to get so powerful with those characters of the women?
Well, I drew much of my inspiration from history. If you read a lot of medieval history, like Westeros, it's basically a patriarchal society where women have quite restricted roles in society, and there are certain things that women are not allowed to do. And they're not allowed to be the Pope or to be a bishop or to have offices in the church. Depending on a country, in some cases they could inherit a crown or a lordship. In other cases, they could not. That changed over time in various things. They were not allowed to enter certain professions. They were, the property of their husband or their father or whatever. All of these restrictions existed, and women had to function under them for many centuries. Nonetheless, various strong and powerful women still arose and affected the course of history. Eleanor of Aquitaine was the wife of 2 kings and mother to 2 more kings, and was probably one of the most dominant personalities of her age. Joan of Arc turned the entire course of the 100 Years' War and created France as it exists today, rather than being just part of England. These 2 characters are very well known, but there were many others. Isabella of Spain, partnered with Ferdinand, a hugely powerful queen. Elizabeth I of England, even her mother, Mary Tudor, or her sister rather, Mary Tudor. Going back centuries earlier, the Civil War in England between Stephen and Matilda, which was over whether in fact a woman could in fact inherit the English crown, and they passed her over, but she was pissed about it and went to war, and that war ripped England apart for a generation. So there have been many strong women in history, even though the society was by no means an egalitarian one. And I try to reflect both things in my books to show a society that doesn't give women equal rights, and the frustrations and the pain and the difficulties that cause many of the women, but also to show certain women of strong character or ability dealing with that in one way or another, and what kind of accommodations they make with that, and how they succeed despite these restrictions, and the cost, because there's always a kind of a cost when you buck your social expectations. But it's certainly one of the things that I deal with in the books. One of the things that pleases me most about these books is that I do have so many women readers, and that so many of them come up to me and tell me they do like the women characters in the books, because that is something I work on. And it's not true of a lot of fantasy. I think a lot of fantasy either neglects women, or if they do use women, like the women warrior has become sort of a stock, almost cartoonish character, the babe in the brass bikini, which is sort of impractical. So I'm trying to deal with these things and turn these on their head and offer a wide variety of different women who are different from each other and reflect different ways of dealing with a kind of society like that.
Up here.
Up there.
Can I? First of all, thank you for being here. And my question is, how can you think of so many characters and so well-shaped characters? Do you base yourself on the people you know to write them?
I base the characters on, yeah, on people I know. I base the characters on characters from history. I don't just take a character from history, though, and file off the name and attach a new name to it. That kind of one-to-one thing has never interested me. I'll take a aspect of a certain character and meld it with an aspect of another character and a touch of imagination, and hopefully come up with someone who is not an exact duplicate of a historical character, but is well enough grounded in reality to be plausible. And for the viewpoint characters, of course, I look inward. I look at myself. It's true that many of the characters in the books, the viewpoint characters, are not like me, at least to a surface examination. You know, I've never been an exiled prince. I am not a dwarf. I've never been an 11-year-old girl. But all of these people, despite whatever else may be happening to them, whatever particular burdens they have to bear or whatever forces have shaped them through their lives, are human beings first and foremost. And I think our common humanity is the thing that unites us far more than our differences divide us. And I always try to keep that in mind. And you know, when I'm writing a character, you know, look inward and try to think how I would feel in that situation, and remember that, you know, as they say in Casablanca, it's all the same old story, a fight for love and glory. I think our motivations that drive all human beings are kind of the same, and sometimes we need to be reminded of that we're all alike under the skin.
The last one from the web, at least. Sylvia Costa asked if you have to live in one of the cities in Westeros, which one do you choose and why?
If I had to live in one of the cities of Westeros,
In Westeros.
I suppose I would choose Old Town, which you haven't seen much of, but it's got the Citadel there, which has a really good library. And, you know, I would probably be a maester or something like that, and going in there and reading the library and teaching ravens how to study, how to carry messages and that sort of thing. I think that sort of life suits me a lot better than wielding a sword. I would not last very long as a swordsman, I fear.
Never know. One last question from the crowd.
Sure. Right there, in the red, yeah, right in front of you, yeah.
The lady
Thank
in
you.
red.
Thank you. I'm curious about the process of creating characters. You said that when you created the characters in the beginning, you knew what was going to happen to them. What about the characters that appear later in the books? Did you know that they were going to exist?
What about, excuse me, what about which characters?
I mean,
The ones that come later.
Later in book 3, for example, when they are in the north, some characters that appear. Did you have the idea that they were going to be in your book, or you decided?
Not necessarily. I mean, I knew the major shape of the major characters. I didn't necessarily know all of the minor characters. And of course, there are lots and lots and lots of minor characters. But if you can find a first edition or an old edition from the 1990s of Game of Thrones, and you look at the original appendix in the back of the book, you'll see many character names. Some of them still haven't appeared, but I had plans for all of those characters. I mean, I created them and put them in there because eventually I would have some role for them. So if they're not in the Game of Thrones appendix, I probably hadn't thought of them at that point, and they were people who showed up later, and because the appendix gets longer and longer just as the books do. I mean, by the time of Dance with Dragons, the appendix is practically a novel by itself here. and concludes many things. I didn't know beginning that Danny would necessarily be meeting all these particular people in the city of Marine, for example. I just knew in broad senses that she would be eventually going to Slaver's Bay and acquiring some unsullied soldiers. You'll see that the unsullied are in there. You see the unsullied in Magister Illyrio's manse. So I already had the unsullied in mind, but I didn't have all the things developed. So it's a kind of an organic process that goes on.
Meus senhores e minhas senhoras, é tudo por hoje. Muito obrigado pela vossa presença. Uma salva de palmas para este grande senhor, George Martin.
Thank you.
Só um último recado, queria pedir-vos também um aplauso para o Sci-Fi e a Mel por tornarem este momento possível. Não se esqueçam, próxima segunda-feira, dia 23, 22h15, o início da segunda série. Muito obrigado, boa noite, até uma próxima oportunidade.